So I welcome on the panel Lisa Marti and Veronika Scherer. They have not yet been introduced because they did not give a talk this morning, but you participate now in the panel discussion. And that's all about practicalities that we want to discuss for the next 30 minutes roughly. And we heard a lot of things about control and regulation and suggestions that the federal shareholder could take over the control of large firms, and so it was a rich 2 days that we had. Now the question that is, how do we make things happen? And let me confront you very shortly with a little historical anecdote and the hypothesis. The hypothesis would be, do you need only persons or do you need persons that also have a personality? And how should this personality interact with the system to make things happen? The historical anecdote or the example, it's not an anecdote, it's reality, is around 1900 in the Deutschen Kaiserreich, a classical state official, Ministerialdirigent Dr. Althoff. He was a very typical Prussian or post-Prussian official with strict rules, but it turned out that he broke all the rules. He did not obey. What did he do? His vision was to get the best scientists to Germany and to build up a science which would also benefit industry. So he was responsible to attract to Berlin, especially Dahlem, has been founded at those times, but also to Göttingen, people like Max Planck, Paul Ehrlich, Walter Nernst, Robert Koch, Otto Warburg, later Albert Einstein. And he did this by a very unconventional strategy of spending money. There's a letter of Otto Warburg, a very famous physiologist, Nobel Prize, everything you can imagine. This is a scientific proposal, it's a thing that we always send to the National Science Foundation, people like me. But it is only one sentence. It says, "Dear Dr. Althoff, I urgently need 30,000 gold mark for my future research. Best regards." And it was granted. Of course, Althoff was the enemy of all the rest of the state officials in Berlin. They became crazy about this guy. He said he's overruling everything that we have set up. He's not behaving well. This is not the rules that we have set. But he was enormously successful. Paul Ehrlich, probably the founder of the Paul Ehrlich Institute, he wrote him a testimonial letter that he said, "You made my career and you made the science of immunology." It was not only the only one science that he was responsible for, but he never showed up in the public. So he did this, pulling the strings behind, but with a very strong conviction. Is it that personalities that we need that see there are regulations, but think in the evening, well, should I care about? Should I do what my conviction is? And take all the enemies into account? So, how should we proceed? What should we do? How should we implement these brilliant ideas that we have heard now over the last 48 hours, even a little bit more also during the dinner? You want to start? Okay.
Yes, because of the word enemy.
Yeah, there are enemies, I can assure you.
I know, and I feel that. Maybe I want to share with you the dynamics in our group of the Schweizerische Studienstiftung. I care a lot about the Schweizerische Studienstiftung and the people that are there. And still, you may have noticed that there are some people thinking inside the system and some people thinking outside the system. Okay, I am a person thinking inside the system. I think that's obvious to everyone. There are a lot of people thinking outside the system. That's very, very important, and I appreciate it so much. And still, I feel that we have the tendency to start looking at each other as enemies. And there
let's say opponents.
Or opponents. And there is where the story ends. If we lose patience with each other, that's not going to work. We shouldn't see each other as opponents. We have to really be patient with each other and keep on talking.
But only if you have a strict discussion, as was demanded by Heinz Karrer, that needs at least two opponents. And then the idea would be that you come to a better solution then if you discuss. Isn't that true?
Yeah, absolutely. But I fully agree what she said, because the basis for everything is a respectful dialogue. If you don't have it, it's much more difficult to find solution. In particular for those who think out of the box or out of the systems, with those they feel just well within a system. Absolutely, I do 100% agree.
Yes, but, oh, sorry.
No. I said enough.
I'm maybe more a person that thinks outside the box. And so, for example, what I was missing here at this conference, or what I'm missing actually in the whole economical system, in the debates about the future economical system, is exactly this dialogue. I think that often when people from outside the box propose ideas, they are stamped as impossible, not realistic, and then they stay impossible, of course. But if you find a dialogue and come together, and I think here it is very important, of course, also to see like what benefits do we have from inside the box, then we can make things possible and go on and work on. And also maybe another point is that yesterday, most of you haven't been here, but we have shown a blue dot, and we asked what it is, and it actually was the share of male and female speakers at this conference, because actually there are only male speakers, and mostly between 40 and 60, most of the time also from Western countries. So I think it's not coincidence, actually. I think that this is actually the people who represent often economic and the people who decide in economics. And I think here we could do a big change in including more female person, more young person, more person with different ethnical backgrounds, with different political views. And I think we have this diversity and we should use this diversity.
Directly related to that?
No, it was trying to answer your question.
Okay. You had a comment directly to that, then we come back to my question.
Maybe a little bit, and maybe also an answer to your question. I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, I wasn't there before, but I guess you're telling the truth. However, there's one thing I would maybe want to caution, just when talking about the box. I think we have to differentiate between the economic system and the financial system. And my experience now is that, and I mean, at a lot of conferences where there's a lot of people, mostly not from Switzerland, from all over the world, and most of them developing countries, and a lot of women. More women than men. Very young also. There's a lot of ideas. And for years, the same things get discussed, because in the end, when it comes to financing, you always run into the box, and the box is a very stiff regulation. You are not allowed to do a lot of things, and if you move a little bit outside the box, you are actually a criminal. It's illegal, and people don't know that. That's what we were saying before. There is no know-how about these things. We know all the details about every African population, and you know, also a lot of young people, but they don't know the realities of this box. We don't like this box and the regulation, but we understand it, and you can't do anything. I mean, you can do something against it, but it does. There, I think it doesn't work with great ideas. But I think in this economy as such in general, there's a lot of areas where there's a lot of freedom where entrepreneurship can flourish, and there I think it's important to be as diverse as possible, because diversity, I think, brings the best results, absolutely. But I think we need to distinguish there. Do we talk about the financial system, or do we talk about the economy in general?
Thorsten.
Yes, now I have two answers.
Excellent.
So maybe directly related to the blue dot, right? So we have done many experiments on asset management. What is the best composition for a group of asset managers? And there it turns out you need heterogeneity. So when you're out there in the financial market, it's a very complex problem which you have to solve. You need male, you need female, you need young, you need old, and you need people from different cultures. So I would be surprised if in the society as such you can do with this blue dot. The answer to your question, I think, it depends on whether you break the rules of the society to your own benefit or to the benefit of the society. So when you do it to your own benefit, you should be put in jail. But the example which you were given was to the benefit of the society, so I would not immediately put him in jail.
But all the rest of your colleagues thought that you should be put in jail.
No.
No, coming back, I think, to your question, so, and of course it's also related to what has been said, so what is the way to go? And of course it's, again, incentives, but personality matters, so as your story, of course, perfectly illustrates it, and a time slot. Huh? But the usual time slot for reforms and changing the system, of course, is crisis. And here Switzerland has a problem. We have a system which doesn't run into crisis normally. Huh? All the big reforms in Europe, especially when you look at what were these reforms, especially in Scandinavia, they were successful, but they all had crises before. Huh? And I would not like to have such a crisis in order to have intelligent reforms. But so it's obvious it's the incentive thing combined with personality. And when you look at Switzerland, so there is a funny story about this. Christoph Blocher, why is he so different? And so I've written a scientific analysis about him, and how has he reacted? He said, oh no, of course, everything is incentives. And looked at the incentives the election system gives to politicians. They all run, the important politicians run into the middle, and Blocher tries to make, play the opposition game, because all these in the middle, they go together, they go a little bit too left-wing, huh? too much to Europe, and he tries to go on the other side. And he said, yes, that's good. But it's even, you should have gone even further, because it's incentives which are totally different. My incentives are totally different than all the incentives of the others. It's because, the first instance, I'm an entrepreneur. And then, interesting, huh? But the important thing is, because he's an entrepreneur who exports almost everything what he produces, therefore he's totally independent. Therefore he can say whatever he likes, which is against the interest of more or less all these politicians who are in the middle of the political spectrum and who are very engaged in, trying to be Swiss and a little bit too much Europe. And he can say this. And he also says, the other entrepreneurs who do not export as much as I, but mostly supply their goods to government, for example, those who are in infrastructure building, they are not really entrepreneurs because they are not independent. They are dependent on government. So these incentive things are very important. And now the question is, of course, we need this variety. And what can we do in order to get variety and good individuals? And the answer is what I, of course, tried to talk about in my expose. So we need to have open market for decision makers, including politicians. Then we get more variety, we get more intelligent people, we get more people who are really engaged to try to achieve something. Therefore, they come to Switzerland. And of course, we have to integrate those. And we have to have clever political institutions. And one institution I really am absolutely fascinating is this idea of these independently elected auditors. There, everybody can go in. It's the low-level entry barriers, so you have to make your whole political living in order to become an auditor.
But okay. That now adds up to a wish list again. That needs also enabling. These people do not pop up like that. It needs the ability to act autonomously. And also the attitude.
If you have these institutions, then it becomes attractive to go into politics, but it's not attractive to go into politics if you have to go into a party to make all this oxen tour through the party, if you are bound to the place where you are living, and so on. Opening up the market in various respects, not only with this politician story, then people come in. And that's exactly what Switzerland did. Therefore, we are quite successful because compared to other countries, we are quite open. And those who are partially even more open, for example, Baden-Württemberg, they are at least in this respect. So having these very engaged politicians, that was opened up. And everybody from whole Germany can go to Baden-Württemberg. Therefore, they are successful. So opening
jump
up.
in. I do not want to have a bilateral discussion.
Maybe just as an answer to your question with the personality, if it needs personality and what does it need. So first of all, I think everybody has personality. And I think this, we forget sometimes that every person has personality, and we should maybe also with our educational system, we have a really strict view of what is good and what is bad also in our economical system. And I think instead of maybe just have a fixed idea of how to produce good, we should more take everybody's personality and strengthen these personalities as well, and to kind of like to bring out of everybody his talents and his personality, and not just build one personality that fits exactly as in the picture of what is a...
I agree, that is what I call enabling.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so also it's really easy, and I hear this a lot, okay, this is good, this is bad. The Swiss system is so perfect, and I think here we really should also start criticizing and also really ask us, and I speak from maybe a question even behind also, is growth really the good thing that we want, or is there other possibilities of growth than economical growth? Is there maybe the possibility of or make our economical system more democratic, for example, or yeah, like really more basic questions as well.
Yeah, but you have a concrete suggestion how to proceed?
My concrete, or more or less concrete suggestion would be that you start this dialogue, that you don't block it from the beginning as not possible, and with starting this dialogue, you find solutions.
I had the idea that we at least intended to start a dialogue here, but obviously,
yeah, of course. I mean, like, we are here to start this dialogue, and I think this dialogue is started, and there have been a lot of interesting questions, and I think this dialogue should go further.
Yeah,
and as you told us,
expand the dialogue.
Expand the dialogue and go deeper.
I think it's a very good point. I would like to give a different perspective to that. Let's say the key word is much more the cohesion in a society. If we want to go forward, if we want to achieve something, we need a cohesion. If we don't have it, it's difficult to go forward. So how can we develop this kind of culture, this kind of thinking? I tried to give an answer from our perspective in the business. The more we have different views within the businesses, the more difficult is to get an impact on the politics. So, in other words, the recipe is cohesion. What do we have to do? We have to intensify the dialogue. I will give you an example. Free trade agreement with India. Very, very difficult topic. Why? So for instance, for the pharmaceutical industry, it's a very, very difficult, it's a big issue because India has a generic industry. So they are not interested in protecting the patents. So they are not in favor of such a free trade agreement. A lot of other sectors, they would like to have it. So what can we do to come to a conclusion taking into account? We have totally different views on that. And that's just one example which I believe we have to really intensify, also to respect different views, and based on these different views, how do we go forward?
Just to remind you that 100 years ago, Switzerland had the same attitude as India.
Yeah.
That made Basel
Yeah.
great. Okay, so.
Well, maybe I can answer to this. We talk about let's intensify dialogue and so on. So wouldn't it be a lot of personality if we say we need to start today? On the 16th of October 2015, let's not just say goodbye, shake hands, and congratulate each other on the good things we said, and then leave. Let's start today. Who would join?
No. See more hands?
I think there is no question about whether one should start today or not. It's obvious. Of course, one should start today. But the question is how. And again, you said, of course, I agree. But the question is how to implement all this. And I'm convinced we have to do it via institutions. So why is the Swiss system different? Why are Swiss politicians not so negative to each other? Why is the Ständerat different from the National Council? It's the election system. When you have majority vote, it makes a difference than when you have proportional vote. When you have this system with a clear opposition which wants to come into government, they have only to be destructive. Only if you are really destructive against the government and not constructive, you have a chance to be elected into government. Because otherwise, the people, if you are constructive as an opposition politician and you contribute to improving the quality of politics, then of course the government is re-elected because everybody first thinks, oh, the government did the perfect job. And those who are really clever and see, oh, this was thanks to the opposition because they were so constructive, they say, let's keep them in opposition because otherwise we will not find any more. We will never find such a good opposition anymore. Huh? Keep the best ones who are constructive in opposition. And therefore we have to change the system. We should elect the opposition. We should not take the losers and put them into opposition. We have to elect the opposition.
So we have to elect.
That's the system with this.
The analysis is perfectly fine. So
yeah.
what are we going to do? We have to elect what? Now on Sunday. No. How to change the institution? Obviously, the institution are doing not a proper
job. Talk. And now the funny thing about this is, I'm happy if the institution is not changed so quickly. So my problem is, as soon as you are writing about these things, I have lost my idea because there are no patents on social innovations. They will not cite me anymore. That's the problem.
Unfortunately, time is over. We have time for 2 or 3 urgent questions from the audience. Are there? Yes.
Thank you. It's definitely an interesting discussion, but I would like to focus on your big blue dot from yesterday. I definitely think something like this is the beginning, but I think you misrepresented today and yesterday and the day before yesterday. We talked yesterday for a half a day, and I am under 30, I'm definitely under 40, It was definitely a half a day. In the whole program, it was like 2.5 days. My mathematics tell me we talked for a fifth of the time, and you did not even look at us.
That's absolutely right.
So,
That's absolutely right, and I think I actually really enjoyed this part, and I thought it was one of the most interesting parts because there were very interesting ideas, because actually your ideas were kind of concrete, but I cannot give here now. So yes, I'm sorry for this. We looked more at the speakers in sense of like long speaks, but you had half a day and you were young people, you were female, you were from different origin, and I think this is a start, this is how we should continue.
thank you.
The curtain has to fall then. Thank you very much for this very short round. Thank you for attending the panel.